Hello and welcome to the Teachers Teaching Teachers podcast, where we talk everything teaching, one brilliant teacher at a time. So go grab your cup of tea, get ready for your walk or drive, and let's get into it. So today, episode 1, and I am absolutely excited for this one. And, we don't have a guest. I'm going to be straight honest, we don't have a guest, but for this episode, really, I wanted to provide you with a quick snapshot into my journey into the teaching profession. And, hopefully there's not too many of these, because I really don't plan on making this podcast too much about me, but more about, all the wonderful educators out there that I have the privilege of working with, or just knowing and being able to speak to. But today I thought, it would be nice just to get a quick brief overview as to how it just all came to this point right now, and really ultimately leading into why I've decided to start this podcast. So I guess really to start, I give you a very brief context into, who I am, who is Sanna. And the best way to do this really is just the top of my head. Obviously, born and raised, I was born in Melbourne in Australia. However, just before I turned 1, I had moved to Ballarat. My family moved to Ballarat, and I was one of 3 children, and my parents both are from Iranian descent. So they have both, they came to Australia just after the late 70s after the Iranian Revolution, and ended up in Australia. They both got married. They got married here, and that's that. And then some 15, 20 years later, however long it was, the third child, yours truly, came into this life. And so I guess born in Melbourne, moved to Ballarat when I was the age of 1, and I was there up until I went to university. So my first 18 years of my life, I grew up in a regional town, around maybe at that time 80,000 people. So it's nothing like one of these big, large cities, but it was, nonetheless, there was enough going on for a teenager or a small child growing up there. But yeah, growing up, I always really enjoyed school. I always felt, especially in the later years of my high schooling, I was definitely someone who loved social interactions. I was very out there. I joined many clubs. I loved theater. I loved sport. I loved all of these things. But my schooling experience wasn't really met with too much distaste. I always really enjoyed school, and I understand that that's not the experience, especially now being a teacher for a couple of years. I really understand that that's not the experience that every child goes through, especially in high school. But I guess I was just one of the fortunate ones. I have a lot of blessings in that sense. I have my family also to thank, obviously a great group of friends. But so my high schooling, and I'll focus on that more because can't really remember too much of my primary school years. Fortunately, my memory doesn't date back that long. But if we're speaking about high school, it was probably from year 9 where I really started to come out of my shell and enjoy my schooling. And, something that I think I remember the most from my high school days would be the relationships that I had formed with my teachers. A lot of students, and I understand this, a lot of people had very poor relationships with their students. They remember that bad teacher. They really do. But I think what's great is that the effect that some of my teachers had on me and the strong relationship that had on me moving forward was huge. And I still remember many of my teachers. I'll reel them off the top of my head. We've got Deanne Justin, Josh Ebels, we've got Matthew Sharkey, we've got all of these people that I remember fondly, especially in the later years of my my life, which I would love to also get on this pod hopefully one day. That'd be absolutely amazing to speak to them and if I could just face to face as well, let them know the effect that they've also had on my upbringing. But yeah, those relationships, feeling comfortable to speak to them, making them really, them making me feel safe in an environment which at that point I didn't realize was so important. And, so many of these teachers that I work with now, like, I know that everything they do is centered around creating this safe environment for the students, for them to be able to, draw out their qualities, improve their skills, develop their capabilities. But at the time, I was just like, oh, that's a really cool teacher. Yeah, and of course, obviously, experiences, at times, also very challenging as a student. And today is so much more different even from 10 years ago when I was in high school. Today with so many different forms of social media out there, this extreme consumption of content that is online, peer groups, the difference between peer pressure from now and then, it's really something that, now being a teacher, I can't really believe how far that's really come. I honestly don't know how I would have coped at that time. So like for these students now, and I'm sure as we have more of these episodes, like the experience that's going to come out, from all of these educators that they've had with these students is just going to be supreme. And I think it's really important that is not so much exclusive to people in the profession, but also the general public. So, I commend a lot of the students that are getting through school these days, because it's no easy slog. But the importance then that teachers have on these is even more significant. So, that's just a very quick summary, I guess, of my high schooling. And straight after high school, then it was a point of I wasn't thinking of teaching at the time. I wanted to get into. I had a kind of a couple of different approaches. I wanted to either get into theater or go into law. So eventually, what happened was I chose law and accounting as a double degree for my undergraduate degree, and I went and studied that in Geelong at Deakin University, and that was a 5-year course. And the first couple of years, it was uni life. Like I was just kind of understanding it, just getting through it. And a few years in, I started to think, I'm like, it just doesn't feel like something that I really want to do. I was 3 years in my degree. I had 2 years left. At the end of the day, through like conversations with family, with friends, I decided that, it's probably better off finishing it, seeing where it goes. And then if other opportunities arise, then okay, cool, we'll go into that. At this point, still, no thought of teaching. Was not thinking of being a teacher. That was obviously something I always thought I could fall back on, which I think is something that a lot of people sense is a common thing in education. This didn't work out, I'll just be a teacher. But I think what we forget is, the amount of work that actually goes into teaching is not something that you can just have as an afterthought. And obviously we'll get into that in later episodes, and maybe even today a bit more too. But yeah, so I was 3 years in my law degree. I had 2 years left. And at this point, I was going to finish it. I knew I was going to finish it, but I wasn't really doing anything. So I guess another big part of my life is that I am a Baha'i, a world religion, with the prophet founder Baha'u'llah. And I guess, if we're talking as a quick summary, but the main purpose of this faith is to bring world unity. And, there are very many ways that obviously Baha'is around the world are really striving to do this. And one opportunity that then arose was this idea of building vibrant communities. And a few of my friends who were also Baha'i were, decided to move into this neighborhood in the western suburbs of Melbourne in Tarneit and start, some of these community building activities, where a lot of those activities are done working with youth and young adolescents. So, we're talking about building their spiritual and moral capacities, also helping them with their academic work. Like both of these sides are something that are important for the development of an individual. And it was at this time when I was still studying law, but I was working in this community for a period of 2 years, that I really felt a sense of significance in what teachers do. And I wasn't a teacher at this point, but what I saw was the effect that teachers and schools in general had on some of these youth that a lot of them were marginalized. And I could feel it from whether they told me themselves just explicitly or just the sense that I got from them, that the effect that something maybe a teacher had once said to them had for their next 1 or 2 months. They were thinking about that constantly, positive and negative, and both ways. Like, don't get me wrong, it wasn't all negative. Some of these things were great, and I think even that gave me a sense of, wow, like this is an extremely significant profession that in year 12, year 11, I kind of pushed aside. I was just like, oh, they're a cool teacher. But there is when, sorry, just hit the mic there. Sorry, guys. There is where I got a glimpse of, all right, like this is the real deal. The impact that this has is massive. So, working in that community for a couple of years, and I'm sure in another podcast, like I'll definitely go into more detail around what we really did and how that also relates to this idea of education, as an educational process. But, working through there, I was coming up to the end of my law degree, and my cousin had recently just participated in this program. And it was this teaching program. And, I hadn't heard of it before. And she said it was Teach for Australia. And so I looked into it. And I found out that Teach for Australia obviously is this organisation that is trying to tackle this idea of educational disadvantage in Australia specifically. It's very easy for us to sit back in Australia where we have, blessings upon blessings. Like, we're a very lucky country, a lot of us. And to sit back and just, not realise that there is still quite a significant educational gap in this rich nation of ours, or in this materially rich nation of ours. And that fascinated me. And after working with a bunch of marginalized youth as well in the community that I was in, the two kind of married each other. And it was almost as if this opportunity had come just at the right time as I was finishing my law degree, because the basis around Teach for Australia is that, it's bringing like-minded individuals who want to make a change and tackle educational disadvantage from other disciplines to undertake their Masters of Secondary Teaching while being placed at a school that, maybe from an area that is hard to staff, or, has some, socially, maybe their social economic status might be a bit lower, etc., etc. And it was just this opportunity to experience teaching and learn teaching while studying it and working at the same time. And this really excited me. And as I was finishing my law degree, I decided to apply at the same time through this rigorous selection criteria and selection process. Obviously, being extremely lucky, I got through, which was fantastic. I was super happy. And, at the end of that year, this was 2018 now, just a bit more than 2 years ago, I started my journey at Teach for Australia. And the way that worked was the entire cohort from around nation that was accepted in that year's program came together for about 6 weeks just before the summer of 2018-19, and went through a portion of our Masters of Education, Masters of Teaching, Secondary Teaching, and at the same time had about 10 or so days of placement at a school. And as soon as that was over, we had about 2 weeks, and we were sent to, the schools that we got chosen for. So, I ended up going to a school in northern Victoria, about 2.5 hours north of Melbourne. So I went somewhere where I didn't have any family, I didn't have a house, but I was really, really, really excited to start this journey. And I knew it was going to be hard. And I think a lot of the people that I'm going to invite onto this podcast as well, just because of the connections that I was able to make during this program, will also be able to speak to Teach for Australia. So I'm not going to go into too much detail today about the program and its merits and like how it works. But, I had started my teaching journey while I was still studying. So at this point, I had just finished law and I was straight into a Master's of Secondary Teaching while teaching at a school. And it's an understatement to say the amount that I had learned in that initial year and was just absolutely insane. Not only about myself, not only about teaching, but about the importance of education. Like, my mind had completely shifted from me, a younger 16, 17-year-old in year 10, year 11, to how I was when I first started at 24, 25. And the experiences that I've gained now to date, 2 years on, last night, we just had our year 12 valedictorian after the year that has been. 2 types of remote learning, which I'm sure we'll get onto in another episode, and the challenges that teaching online and remotely would have, but but getting to that stage and seeing and reaping those rewards and seeing the students and just bringing joy. Like, there's one extremely great bit of one thing that sticks out to me the most is my first year of teaching. When I went on year 10 camp with the year 10s at my school, probably, a fair chunk of them had never been to a city like Melbourne before. They had never seen a tram. They had never, did these things. And there was one point where, studying around Melbourne and also living in the west of Melbourne, like, I knew we all got on the tram. There's like 15, 20 of us. And obviously I'm aware that when the tram starts in Melbourne, it's going to go quite quickly, abruptly, and there's a chance that you'll fall. And none of these students, or many of these students, didn't really expect this to happen. So in my mind, I'm like, half of them are going to fall. Half of them are going to fall here. But it's going to be hilarious. And I want to see it happen because I know they're also going to love it. And, of course, as the tram started, there goes about 5 of the students. But, the joy of them seeing, something like this for the first time, or even some of the younger students in year 7 and 8 going to the beach for a camp, like this is their first experience seeing the ocean or going for a surf or something like this, these things that we take for granted. But, schools are an environment that provide them with something that they've never experienced before. So, there's a lot that I can really talk about my last 2 years, especially in teaching, but I think potentially saving that for another episode is probably going to do it justice. I don't feel like I can give it justice right now. But, and I don't want this initial episode to be too long. I really just want it to be a quick snapshot as to who I am, some of the things about me, some of my experiences, and then why I've led to finally starting this podcast. And, I was lying down in bed and I was thinking, what else can be done to kind of add to this discourse on education, at least in Australia. And I know, a lot of my colleagues, a lot of my friends that are in this profession, a lot of people that are outside of this profession, have certain ideas around what teaching is. But who better to kind of speak about that and reflect about that with than the people on the front lines, This year, 2020, has brought even more, focus on people in education. The importance and significance that schools had this year, especially when students that may have, struggles at home, how the schools provided that environment where they felt safe, they felt comfortable, just these small things and understanding that, that at least in Victoria, but that 4-month period or so where, schools were moved to remote learning, the effect that then it had on the kids, not just their social skills, but their academic skills as well, right? And both of them together, makes for extremely challenging things that these youth and these young adolescents are already going through. So I thought this podcast would create this amazing space where I'd get to then share with the public not only my experiences, but these experiences that I know these amazing teachers are having and these learnings that these amazing teachers are having. I am blessed to be at a school which has an Auslan teacher. And for those who don't know, but that is for students who are hard of hearing, or the deaf students who are required to have, require interpretation, sign language. That is something that I would never have thought would have been something that's necessary, but I'm blessed that one of my colleagues is skilled in this and is able and qualified to teach this language to these students that need it, these students that are unable to learn effectively without it. And, that's something that I'm really looking forward to as well. And just the different ideas, the different experiences. Like, I think education being of such importance is really something that I'm really, really excited to do. And I just want to find this quote from the Baha'i faith around education and spiritual education as well. Just before I close it for today's episode. But Baha'u'llah, the Prophet founder of the Baha'i faith, says that regard man as a mine rich in gems of inestimable value. It goes on to say, education can alone cause it to reveal its treasures and enable mankind to benefit therefrom. And this is just a very simple, straightforward quote, but the importance that education has in bringing out these qualities and these attributes and these capacities of students, children, youth, adolescents, all of these people. It's fantastic. And I really can't wait to share this with others that I know have so much to give in future episodes as well. So, guys, I mean, that's really all I wanted to touch on today. I understand this is a solo one for the episode 1, but please just stay tuned. Things are coming. I am getting in touch with people. I'm really excited to have these conversations and like these conversations that also focus on specific topics, but also like just having some fun conversing with these people and bringing out the individual that is behind that teacher. So I'm really excited, super excited. Thank you for obviously tuning in, listening. These are going to be up on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, etc. I am working on that. It's also going to be on the YouTube show. So please make sure that you are subscribed to the YouTube channel Teachers Teaching Teachers, and also on the Instagram, the TTT Pod on Instagram. I'm super excited. Hopefully more news will come out soon as to when they're on some of these platforms. But thank you so much for tuning into episode 1. Can't wait to bring out the next one. And we'll see you soon. Peace.